last day of the beginning of an end of an era. Yesterday was the final space shuttle launch. And I feel that personally because although I was way too small to remember the very first space flights, I was 7 years old on July 20th, 1969. And I was staying with my grandmother Ruth in her house in Cleveland, Ohio. My grandma was such an amazing person. And she told me that a man was going to land on the moon. And he was a fellow Ohioan, Neil Armstrong, was going to land on the moon. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world because I was 7 and a Star Trek addict already. And so I asked her, like Star Trek? And she said, no, not like Star Trek, because Star Trek is what can be. This is what is. And she promised to wake me up in time to watch it, because it was going to be rather late for, well, a 7-year-old. And so I went to sleep, and I remember telling her, Grandma, don't let me miss it. Don't let me. And she promised me that she would wake me up. And because she was my Grandma Ruth, and an amazing woman, she woke me up and made sure I was up and brought me downstairs, and we watched Neil Armstrong land on the moon. And Neil Armstrong is a very accomplished speaker, but like many Toastmasters, he can make an occasional mistake. And what he meant to say was, one small step for a man and one giant step. My grandma made sure that I didn't miss it. I'm looking back at this because space flight means men landing on the moon, and to me, men landing on the moon means trusting my Grandma Ruth to always make sure I didn't miss it. She was a professional musician who learned quite quickly that with these stumpy little fingers, I was never going to play piano. So she found out that I could sing, and she paid for 12 years of voice lessons, and took me to the symphony, and took me to the opera, and took me to the ballet, and took me to museums. And when we were driving somewhere, and she would tell me, oh, Barbara Dawn, there's a landmark on the way here, and this is a battle that took place. And I would tell her, oh, Grandma, make sure I don't miss it. And she took me so many places and did so many wonderful things. My Uncle George was George Schell, who conducted the Cleveland Symphony for 25 years. He and my Grandma Ruth didn't get along because my Grandma Ruth had played the piano in the symphony, but had figured out that she could not afford to pay her bills being a symphonic piano player because they get paid squat. So she quit the symphony and became a honky-tonk singer. But Uncle George and Grandma Ruth got along when it came to the grandchildren and the nieces and nephews. So even though she was persona non grata, when she brought me, we were allowed to go into Severance Hall, and I could lie under the piano while the orchestra practiced. And I tell you what, I am so glad my grandma didn't let me miss that. She was vitally important to me. She taught me to stand up straight, and taught me to speak up loud, and also taught me a very important phone skill. People can't hear you when you nod. You have to talk. My grandma, she made sure I didn't miss on those skills either. She was a beautiful woman. She was a gorgeous person, and I found a picture of her recently, taken at Glensheen, because she traveled all over the country, playing in nightclubs and dance halls and all of these things, and there's a picture of my grandmother sitting on a bench at Glensheen. And I would love to find the Duluth newspaper that would have the publicity shot in it. So yesterday was very important to me. It not only touched me because it was the end of manned flight from the West, but it was a reminder of how much my Grandma Ruth cared about me and wanted me to have every experience, and was willing to go to the trouble of putting a child to bed and then going up a couple hours later and making her get up so that she wouldn't miss that first step on the moon. A lot of what I am today is because of my Grandma Ruth. I'm really glad she didn't let me miss it. But we don't need to catch rides with the Russians.